When Donald Trump was running for president in 2016, they told him that he had to have a transition team. And he was like, I don't want a transition team. And they told him, no, sir, at this point in the election, you legally have to have a transition team. And so he begrudgingly nominated Chris Christie to head his transition team. So why is it so important to have a transition team? Well, it's because every time there's a new president, the president fires all the people who the old guy picked to run the various government departments, right? So like the Department of Commerce, the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, whatever. All those departments have people running them, and every time there's a new president, there's a new person running them. So imagine, for example, that the incoming president hires you to run the Department of Energy. Well, you have 2.5 months-ish from when he gets elected in early November to January 20th when he gets sworn into office to learn everything there is to know about how to run the Department of Energy. That's harder than it sounds because a lot of government departments do stuff that has nothing to do with the stuff you would think that they would do, right? So for example, if you hear the Department of Commerce, you'd think, oh, that's the government branch that regulates trade. But they also do a bunch of other stuff like keeping the time, right? Who says what time it is? The Department of Commerce says what time it is. So on November 8th, 2016, the morning after Donald Trump got elected, all these people from all these different government departments prepared for members of Trump's transition team to show up so that they could show them how to do their jobs. And nobody showed up. In Michael Lewis's book, The Fifth Risk, he interviews a bunch of government employees and asks them, what does your work day look like, and what do you do, and why is it important? It turns out that a lot of the stuff the government does is pretty important. When the government shuts down, the government stops doing everything it does that's unessential. But the thing is, pretty much everything the government does is essential, right? Like, that's why the government does it. One of the guys Michael Lewis talked to is called John McWilliams, and he was the chief risk officer of the Department of Energy under Barack Obama. And what he does is kind of like what a Wall Street firm risk analyst does. He looks at all the things that can go wrong and cause a catastrophe, and he says, how do we prevent them? He says that something really, really bad could happen if the government just stops doing what it does now, right? So, for example, he points to this town in Washington where the government used to make plutonium, and it turns out that when you make plutonium, there's all this, radioactive waste. It's not good for the environment, and so the government has to pump a bunch of money into cleaning it up. And so, if the government stops cleaning it up, then the people there, like the living conditions, are not going to be good. Also, there are all these nuclear weapons laying around, and the government is in charge of making sure that those don't fall into the wrong hands. That should give you the overall idea. Trump's strategy was to put people in charge of government departments who didn't want that government department to do what it did, right? So the most egregious example of this was, so in 2012, Texas Governor Rick Perry was running for president, and he was up in a presidential debate, and they asked him, what would you do if you were president? And he was like, I would eliminate 3 agencies of the government. I would eliminate the Department of Commerce, the Department of Education, and then he just totally forgot what the third one was. And he spent like a minute on stage just blundering and trying to be like, shucks, I don't know, ha ha, oops. Well, the third department was the Department of Energy, and Donald Trump hired Rick Perry to run the Department of Energy.
It's 3 agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
Now, the risk of sabotaging the government and preventing it from doing what it does is that you might get some sort of huge disaster, right? In fact, we did kind of have that. In 2018, Donald Trump got rid of the pandemic response team that Obama had created in 2015. Now, a lot of people will say, like, oh, the government's so bloated, it spends all this money, we need to clean it up, we need to slash the budget, we need to get rid of the stuff that it does that isn't important. And I agree with that, but the problem is, how do you tell the difference between something that's important and something that's unimportant, right? If you decide, we're going to cut the federal government's budget by 30%, maybe 29% of that budget is stuff that, we can get rid of and we can just give the taxpayers their money back instead. But maybe that 1%, there's like, some sort of nuclear war scenario that you create by getting rid of it. The cover of The Fifth Risk is a giant Jenga tower, and I think that's a good metaphor because, in a Jenga tower, you can get rid of most of the blocks and it's fine, but if you get rid of the wrong block, it all comes crashing down. Every year there's this thing called the Sammy Awards, which is this award show that this guy in the government puts on because he felt that government employees are underappreciated. For example, Michael Lewis wrote a new afterword for the paperback edition where he talks about this guy, Art Allen. And Art Allen is a scientist who works for the Coast Guard. And he created this algorithm that helped the Coast Guard predict where people who got lost at sea ended up, right? So if you fall off a boat and you have a life raft and nobody knows where you are, Art Allen's algorithm can predict where you ended up with reasonable accuracy so that the Coast Guard can actually find you. Governments from all over the world use Art Allen's algorithm, and it's super useful. He's probably saved like thousands of lives, but nobody knows his name. There are probably thousands and thousands of Art Allens who do something really, really cool in the government, and nobody ever finds out about them. This book did kind of change my view of how the government works a little bit, right? Like my view is that the government is super corrupt, and people in there, they're not doing their jobs well, and does all this stuff that it doesn't need to do, which I still think is true to some extent. But now I also think that a lot of people in the government are well-meaning, and they're really trying to do their jobs well. They're really trying to make the world a better place. Apparently, President Obama agrees that government employees are underappreciated because he bought the movie rights to The Fifth Risk. Then his company hired Adam Conover to make a TV series that's loosely based on The Fifth Risk that just features cool things that government employees are doing. Now, I would totally watch this show if Adam Conover wasn't in it, because Adam Conover is like a totally useless person. He's so stupid. But, it's just a cool premise. So, thanks so much for watching Theo's Book Club. If you're new around here, my name's Theo. I make short videos like this one about the books that I read so that you can learn all the big ideas and so you can decide, is this interesting? Do I want to read this book for myself? If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. It's right down there. I would greatly appreciate it. This is a brand new channel. I'm trying to grow it. It tells YouTube, hey, this is a good video. We should show it to more people. You can also hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of these book review videos popping up in your feed. And until next time, don't break anything, and have a great day.